If you're just starting or have recently started playing Motorfest, you probably feel a bit behind in terms of knowing what cars to use in grand races and summits. So in this video, I'm giving you the absolute best beginner cars for each class. Let's go. All right, real quick before we get into it, if you're looking for any of my Motorfest Pro settings, you can go to militiagamingco.com, click on Motorfest Pro settings from the top, and there you'll find all of my tunes up to date. All right, let's get into it. So some of the cars in this video are the meta car for each of these classes, and some are not. And I'll make sure to point that out as we go. But if you're looking for all of the meta cars, I have this video right here. And keep in mind, the meta is likely to change with the upcoming new season because they usually introduce new cars. So just check the pinned comment on the video for a link to the most up-to-date best cars video. The cars that are not meta in this video are recommended simply because they are easier to drive and will likely lead to better results for you than using the meta cars. All right, let's get into it. This is ordered from least important to most important. So starting with number 11, the RB14 in Alpha Grand Prix. Alpha Grand Prix is a class where basically all of the cars perform really similarly. Some have more or less handling or, turning radius, but for the most part, all of the cars in the class handle fairly well. The reason I recommend the RB14 is for a couple of reasons. It has a shorter wheelbase, it handles a little bit better than the others, and it has a lot of grip. But in general, you can sort of pick whichever car you want in AGP because the grip is so high that it's the easiest class to drive, and thus it lands on the bottom of my list. Let's move into drift. Now for drift, I recommend the Unicorn. The only reason I recommend this car is because it's the fastest car in the class by a mile. Like, there's nothing even close. Unfortunately, the car is not the easiest to drive, particularly in off-road settings. I strongly recommend increasing your steering sensitivity to help you with this car off-road. You need to be able to react really quickly and turn the car and counter steer when the car starts to slide. With that said, I understand that I'm recommending the easiest cars to drive and this one is not, but the Unicorn is so far ahead of everything else in the drift category when it comes to racing and grand races that I just can't recommend anything else in the class. I will give a very honorable mention though to the Hoonigan Evo 9. The car is okay. It's faster than most and it's sort of easier to drive than the Unicorn, but not by a mile. So anyways, the Unicorn in drift is what you want. Now moving into number 9, for monster, I recommend the Silverado. And most of the monster trucks handle pretty much the same, but the Silverado has slightly better acceleration than the other cars. It has a better top speed, but only by a slight margin. The Silverado is the best monster truck in the class, and none of them handle very different than the others. So this one is just the fastest car, and it is the meta car for the class. The same thing goes for that Unicorn that I just mentioned. All right, moving into number 8, the P51 Mustang for plane. Now, you're not going to be racing planes that much in the grand races, but this plane is very useful for a lot of the feats and summits. It's also super useful in grand race routes where you have to use a plane, and there's not too many of those lately. Usually they'll give you the choice of a plane or like a rally raid or rally vehicle. But if you have to use a plane, the P51 Mustang is the fastest plane in the class. I also recommend in plane using the Zivco Edge. This is the best handling plane in the class. It has insanely tight turning radius and it's very maneuverable. So that's the one you want to use for your feats, and then you're going to use the P51 Mustang for racing. All right, moving into number 7, this is for the rally category, the Citroen C3. Now, this is not the fastest car in the class. However, it is the easiest car to drive. It's a really good, solid all-around car. It's extremely fast. It handles really well. It's very stable. It's a car that I think most beginners would have an easy time with, and I think they can drive it pretty fast. There are lots of cars in the rally category that do perform well, but I think the C3 is just slightly easier to use for the beginner player. All right, moving into number 6, we have the rally raid category. And for this one, I recommend the BMW Z4. Now, the Z4 is solid in basically everything that it does. It handles well, it has got decent top speed, it's got decent acceleration, it does well in the hairpins, it does well in the straights. It's kind of an all-around car. However, I don't classify this as the exact meta car. Now, is it really good in everything? Yes, but it's not better than the Tacoma when it comes to racing downhill, and it's not better than the 959 when it comes to handling. It's sort of a middle of the road car. It does really well at everything. So if you're going to have one rally bid car as a beginner, this is the car you want to go for. All right, moving into number 5 for the racing category, I recommend the T50S. This is the meta car for racing. There are other cars that you can use that would be nice. However, I think getting used to the T50S right away is going to be your best bet. It does very good with guttering. It has very good handling. It's extremely good for acceleration and NOS power. I think overall the T50S is definitely the best car for you as a beginner because it's not wild, it's not out of control, it's easy to drive, and it happens to be the fastest car in the class. All right, moving up to number 4 is motocross. Now, motocross is not a class that you see a lot of. However, I put this really high on the list because the difference between the Yamaha motorcycle and the other motocross bikes is really, really big. The Yamaha is way better. It's better at top speed. It's better for NOS power. It's better acceleration. It's just an all-around better experience. It even handles slightly better than a lot of the motocross bikes. So this one is by far the best in the class, and it's also the easiest one to use. So this is a must-buy for all the beginners because you're not only going to be using it in grand races, you can use it in feats, you can use it in your playlist. This is definitely the best bike to use. All right, moving into the top 3 most important cars you want to get, and that is Street 2, Street 1, and Hypercar. So starting with Street 2, I strongly recommend the F40. The F40 is dominant right now. It is the meta car for Street 2 in the majority of scenarios. There are some certain fringe scenarios that you would use a specialized car, like something with more top speed or something with better NOS power. But the F40 by and large is not only easy to control, but it also dominates in the gutters, it dominates handling, and it actually does have decent speed. Not quite the best top speed, but it's up there. And it's a car that I think every single beginner in this game should have for Street 2. It's the best go-to car. All right, moving into Street 1. For Street 1, I strongly recommend the RS2 Avant. Now, here's the thing. The RS2 is not the meta car for the class. The 911 Carrera 2.7 is. However, the RS2 is much better at handling, it's much better at guttering, and it is much more user-friendly for the beginners. I strongly recommend the RS2. Even though it's not quite the fastest, I really think you're going to have better results with the RS2 than you would the 911 2.7. And finally, the number 1 car that all beginners need to have right now is in Hypercar, and that is the 110. Now, I might get flamed in the comments for this one because a lot of the sweats and a lot of the experienced players think the 110 is sort of the noob car, but the reality is it is the best car for beginners to use. It's really easy to control in terms of hypercars. Hypercars tend to be super wild. They tend to lose grip. They tend to be going way too fast for how they can handle. But the 110 is very in control. When you're driving it, you feel like you're in control. It has some of the best NOS power in the class. It is by far the best off-road hypercar, which is extremely useful for the feats like the escapes. Most of the escape world records are done using the 110 because it just has incredible NOS power. It has very good off-road speed and handling, and it has really good on-road speed and handling. This is one of the first cars the player bases used when the game first came out because it was discovered that it was so good until we started figuring out some of the other cars. Now, obviously, it's not the best car in the class. There are other cars that handle a lot better, but they are much more difficult to use. So I strongly recommend this 110. If you buy one car on this whole list, you are going to get the most use out of the 110. Please save your money and buy that one. That one's really important. Anyways, that's it for this one, guys. Please remember, if you have any questions, you're welcome to send me a DM on Instagram or Discord. I read every single message that comes my way. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will catch you on the next one. Trigger out.